Hello and welcome to today's webinar as we dive into Canva and really two topics kind of on top of each other. Two things that I enjoy working with. One being kind of how do we be more efficient with our time, especially as educators trying to manage all the different things that we have to take care of. And then the second is how do we make things more accessible? And accessible can be the very strict definition. We want to make sure those with visual impairments and hearing impairments and any other type of impairment and learning disability can access our learning content, but then also just accessibility for the everyday learner, that we make our content in a way that everybody has easier access to it. So we're going to get into kind of both of those. How do we set ourselves up as educators to really be able to create our content and be able to kind of have a template that is easy to just keep going and make it easy to keep moving forward and not have to be starting all over again every time we go in. And then also setting that up to be accessible. So that's kind of where we're going today. And if you've not been with me before, my name is Nathan Wells. I work for Phygital Labs. And Phygital, we like, as our name says, physical and digital, Phygital. We like to bring together the best of both worlds and what makes a successful classroom. And when we lead training, what makes a successful training environment. So whether virtual or in person, we try to bring together those best things. Now, in a short webinar, we're not going to be able to do a lot of interactive activities, but I hope you'll be able to work alongside us and try some of these things out as I'm going through them. So I'm going to do some accessibility call outs here at the beginning, talk about some good design options that are just good for everyone, that help everybody to be able to access our content in an easy way. And then we'll get into some of those things that help you set up for success. How do you set up well the first time? Right now, we're going into summer, or maybe you've already started summer break. So now's a good time maybe to either clean up content or start fresh, thinking about the fall. Sorry, if we're not already in that mindset, or if you're just getting out of, or you're still in the end of school year mindset. But as we start cleaning out or moving into summer, how do we prepare ourselves so that we are set up for success next year, as we head towards that? So a couple of call outs quickly. Color and visual design. One of the things that I've always talked about, so I've been doing presentations outside of my own classroom for over 15 years now. And at first, that was just in my own school, helping support other educators just within my building, helping do quick little presentations at our staff meetings, that I then started going to and supporting others in area schools, and then in our district, and then beyond. And one of the early things I clued in on was that educators aren't always the best at designing, and that included me early on. I had some hard things to learn, and some of that is too much on slides. And a lot of times what that means is our text is way too small, way too compact, and the colors don't work well together. And so some easy things we can do to make our presentations, our handouts, and anything we're putting up in front of our kids, whether it's in an LMS, a learning management system like Canvas or Schoology or Google Classroom, Microsoft Teams, whatever system you're using, or a website, a quick web page we're building in Canva or other places, or whatever it is you're doing, and a presentation or whatever it is, right? Whatever you're using, there's some easy wins to make sure it's accessible for all of our kiddos. So one of the things is high contrast. So I have some bad examples on the screen. One is this box, the word high. You may be able to make it out okay on this webinar, but for some individuals that have visual struggles, that's actually really a struggle to see that. That could be really hard to make out, especially if there was a lot of text there. So a better example of that would be like the title of this slide. where we have the purple with a white text, and you notice that text is a little bit thicker font, and this text is a very thin font. So that plays into that as well. Really big font, small font, right? And that goes into, it's actually, I think, on another slide, that our font size makes a big difference. Never smaller than 24 if you're doing a presentation. The other thing is, do not rely on just colors to make things stand out. This question mark helps us know that we're like asking a question, or we should be thinking, what is this about, right? Like it makes your eyes go to it because it's a bright color, but also it makes you realize, okay, there's gonna be a question here, or there's something we're like considering, right? Like the visual is not just the color may help, but it's also what is that color? In this case, the question mark, to make us think, to question, what am I using? My point being, what am I using to get my students' attention? I use icons a lot, simple graphics. Those are my go-to things I like to use in presentations and handouts. I've started doing more handouts and trainings, in simple web pages I put together for trainings, for how-to materials and stuff like that. And I'll use icons a lot to help bring across a point, because colors and long text aren't always as helpful as a simple graphic or a simple icon. And detailed pictures can sometimes be very distracting. All right, so the other thing is color combinations. Now this, where the word play is, if you can make that out, is actually extremely hard for some to see. I actually have a family member who's colorblind. He would not be able to read that. He would not know a word is there. I've actually asked him. He would not know a word was there. He would just see a blank area right there. So we need to be considering that. The best color to use, where we know all students can see it, and even if we don't know if we have a colorblind student, is dark blue. Dark blue on white is the best color combination. And you'll notice I have a kind of darker purple with white, so the inverse works really well as also. And then this last one, I kind of overlapped the wording on purpose here. Really busy, really busy backgrounds, like a plaid, or like a, I've seen teachers use like a fun end of school summer, or spring tablecloth, and kind of have fun pattern, but then it's like nobody can see it. Like it's so distracting, and like my eyes are like blurry and my mind can't keep up. It's too much. There's busy patterns. And so you'll see I have these blocks up at the top right we use for our Phygital Labs, out of our Phygital Labs logo on some of our slides, but it's very contained. It's only in a very specific area of the slide. So it highlights something, but it doesn't distract from the main content. So we try to model that well. So making sure our backgrounds, like the main background, is simple. Our colors have a good contrast to them. We use visuals that are meaningful and maybe have a color to them that has a purpose, but it helps that visual have meaning. And we're not just relying on the color to bring in your attention. And so I said already, at least 24 font. I think all of these are 28 or 32 that you're seeing on this slide. So I usually, 24 is like the minimum, which I believe was the last slide. I think if you notice the difference, see this I believe is 24, and this is either 28 or 32. And then sans serif, and if you're not familiar with fonts, that's okay. I wasn't really until I left the classroom, was working on building presentations and working for other organizations that I had to be more aware of that. But something to be thinking about is when you look at sans serif fonts, you can just ask an AI, right? Ask an internet browser search, an internet search for different sans serif options. And what's nice about sans serif, this is an example of one, is they're very clean, simple, curved. And so they're easy to make out and read. They don't have confusing extra curves to them. They don't have, fancy little things on them. They're not cutesy. And again, we're trying to make the main point the main point. We're not distracting from the content. So if we're trying to get our students to learn something and to focus on something, then we want that to be the main point, not something cutesy. And then the same thing with capitals. If we have something that's just all capital letters, sometimes there's a place for that. But if it's long text that's all capitals, that just takes away from the readability. It can actually be a strain on cognitive load, which just means your thinking power over time. Headings and sections are really helpful. So, the heading of this slide, text and readability, helps us understand what's going on here. And if this was going through a screen reader for a student with low visibility that I sent this presentation to, it would tell them that this section is about text and readability. So the screen reader uses headings and section headings as a organization tool to help the student and or adult who's using a screen reader to understand what they're going through. So headings and organization by sections is actually very helpful. In PowerPoint, in excuse me, Google Slides, Canva, you can actually, there's an option in your little slide sorter to create a section. That's why that's there. It can be helpful for you as a presenter and as an educator to like split up your material. So that way, as you're working on it and you're building it, you know what you're doing. But then also it has other purposes for accessibility too. And then keep sentences short and straightforward. And that's not just for elementary, even for our secondary and higher ed, our adult learners, shorter text is easier and quicker to process. If I can process something faster, it gives me a chance to think about it. So that's why my bullet points here don't have a ton. I try to keep my content a little bit skinnier, smaller, quick to understand. So now you can see it. All right. Font at least 24. Simple and clean font. Avoid all caps. Use clean headings. Clear headings. Keep sentences short. So it makes it easier to understand, and then we can focus on the learning content instead of worried about, oh my gosh, there's so much text here. What am I learning, right? It just really takes that extra cognitive load, right? Which is just having to think more than is necessary. And then images and graphics. So add alt text to meaningful images. So I'll show you an example of this in a moment. But when we have extra images that don't help anything, that aren't necessary, they don't add anything to what we're either having a presentation, that's where we usually see that be the most distracting, or on like a web page, or again, in your learning management system, it just adds distraction to the learning content and can take away from what students are supposed to be learning and getting from you. Avoid decorative images. Make sure your visuals are directly supporting, and then label diagrams. So if you have a diagram or chart and you don't have the correct labels on there, unless of course you're asking your students to label them, sometimes they can be really distracting. So this one, for instance, I'm just going to go out of my presentation for a second. So let's make this a little bit bigger so it's easier to see. This image, if I right click on it in Canva, it says alternative text. And so you can see here, I added alt text. Now, the beauty is in the last update that Canva did this spring, they added this nice AI feature that's, it will actually create the alt text for you, which is incredible. Because I always struggle with like, oh, am I adding enough detail to my alt text? Like I want to make sure it's correct. And so I've always struggled with that a little bit. So I love that it does that now. Same with a lot of the AI tools. I use Canva a lot and Claude. If you drop any image into Gemini, ChatGPT, Claude, Copilot, whatever you want to use, pick your flavor. Pretty much all of them will create alt text for you. And then you can go in and pretty much all of the main systems now have a way for you to add alt text, which is alternative text. And alt text is specifically helpful for those, excuse me, that are using screen readers, specifically online websites, but even in presentations like this. And then follow logical orders, make it easy and understandable so that students know where to look. If the presentation again is like cutesy or all of a sudden like they're jumping from different places all over the screen, it's hard to follow. It's hard to understand what's going on. It can be confusing. If it's just overcrowded and like, what are we doing right now? It can be really hard to understand. When things are consistent, when things are fairly predictable, then students aren't thinking about where to look. They're thinking about what they're learning. And that makes a huge difference. There's actually some really good research on that. I should have grabbed that before today. But there's actually some research that was out, not recent, like it's been out a while, about learning. And that if students know where to turn, then they can focus on the what and not the where. And that really can make a difference in how they're going through their learning process. And it's not a cognitive like, oh, where do I look? You know, it's in the back of their mind. The brain is trying to figure out quickly what to look at and where to look at. But if it doesn't have to do that, if it always looks at the top left and then goes forward, then that makes it a lot easier to learn. Now, there is room for novelty. There's 100% room for novelty, for engagement, right? Sometimes adding in a video, sometimes having audio, sometimes having a graphic organizer, or, you know, on this slide, if I broke this into 4 boxes instead of 4 bullet points, that changes the visual a little bit for engagement, but it still would start at the top left and go down and across the screen to the right. So that type of change is helpful at some times, but to always like, oh, now we're starting at the bottom right and then going up, right? Like those types of weird changes just overwhelm some learners and is not helpful, especially those with some type of learning disability. So those are things to think about. All right, I'm adding too much time on some of these, but I think they're really helpful. Audio and video, make sure there's captions, look for ways, pretty much all of the main video caption tools, or sorry, a lot of the video tools nowadays provide captions and transcripts. So look for being able to do those. Canva, we're in Canva right now. If I go to create a video, one of the main, let's do a square video real quick. It automatically now will create, when you add audio, if I were to record myself right now, which you can do that under uploads, there we go. I always have to think. When you go to record yourself, it'll automatically give you an option to capture the transcript and create captions now. That's a new feature. It's built in, right? So now there's no excuse to not provide captions for our learners. And let's be honest, if they have access to social media, which so many of our students do nowadays, then they're used to seeing those captions flashing across the screen. So we need to be providing that. And then the clearly and moderate pace, it makes a big difference. One of the biggest things whenever I'm working with new, especially trainers for adults, that I have to work on coaching is slow down, pronunciate, and make sure that everybody understands. And that's public speaking in general. We see that in college classes and high school classes. I have 2 teenagers in my house myself. And whenever I talk to them about public speaking, that is always a common thing. If you've never seen in PowerPoint, Microsoft PowerPoint, they have a free tool called Speaker Coach that you can find under, I think it's under Review tab. And it gives in-time feedback on if you're going too fast, if you're using and the, right, like filler words and other things. So there's great tools out there to practice. Use plain language, define your terms. As educators, that one I feel like we're pretty natural at, unless you're just very much a specialist and you are very focused on your specialty, then maybe it's a good reminder to not use jargon and make sure that you're using a very plain language and understanding what your students already know, right? Their background knowledge, so that you can provide the definitions, provide all the words that they need to understand, supporting them with text and visuals and translation if they need to. And then that cognitive I was mentioning. So avoid too many animations. Those can be super distracting. Limit a concept per page or slide. So you notice I've tried to model that. Break content into chunks. Provide clear directions. So if I know I'm going to ask my learners to focus on something, I want to really break that down into chunks and help them know the different steps. Now, let's think about this for wanting to create something that I'm going to use over and over again. So in Canva, on the left-hand side here, I have home, classroom, projects, brand, Canva AI, and a bunch of other stuff. In projects, if you've not taken advantage of this, I'm going to zoom out just a little bit. If you've not taken advantage of this, there's a whole bunch of folders in here. And when you go to and create a folder, you could call it templates, right? You could say classroom templates, you could say unit templates, right? Whatever you wanted to do. And you could invite your teammates if you wanted to, whatever you wanted to do there. And in your folder, you could then add your designs or create designs that you want to go in there. And so one of the things I would advocate for is as you're creating new things, especially thinking towards the year ahead, create your presentations, homework, handouts, maybe things you're going to upload to your learning management system. So if you have like a template that you always use in your, again, Google Classroom or Canvas or whatever you use, right? Start designing it in Canvas, save it as a template that you can easily just fill in for the new piece. Example, I have this presentation we're using today. I have already got all these little dots that are beautiful and set up, right? I have my text box here. I have these nice little rectangles with curved edges set. I have all of this over here. I have the font and font color and size that I want. If I want to reuse this over and over again, I can go to File and I can make a copy of this. And now I can go to File and I can save that or move the copy rather to that templates folder. And so now I can even change the name. And so now I can move that to my templates folder. So let's go look at our templates folder now. Great. There we go. So if I go to my templates folder, it's going to be in there now. There we go. And I can now even rename this if I wanted to. And I'm going to, actually say, there's the little pencil, that this is going to be my presentation template. And then every time I go to create a new classroom presentation, I can just make a copy of this. Oops, right there, make a copy, and then just replace the content so that way the main things are set up. Now, if I'm going to use this, I also, though, want to make sure that I go through and do a few things. So we talked about the spacing, the font, the colors, the images, alt text, and things like that. Also built into Canva is the accessibility checker. So I can check for design accessibility, and I can have it run its little checker, and it'll give me some indicators of maybe I need to change a few things or not. So that's always a good thing to run. And then I can go through and I can even delete some of these slides, so it's easy. And then when I'm ready, if I'm going to use this over and over again, I can just duplicate this, or I can go to the 3 dots and click duplicate and have that ready to go. Now, the other piece is if you have a design ready, for instance, let's say this page, I really like how this is laid out and I want to use this, but maybe I want to use it in my newsletter. So I need it to be like a document. I can click on resize. And you notice here, if you haven't done this before, instead of all the pages, I can just do what slides, this is slide 8. I can just resize this to 8.5 by 11, and I can click copy and resize. And I can now open up my 8.5 by 11. You notice it's more the size of a document. And I can even, play with some of these things here. Can move these around, right? Can even like duplicate some of these. So that way I have them nice and pretty along the sides, right? So you can play with some of that a little bit. Didn't even take me hardly any time. Just grab the little handles on the side. So let's do one more. There you go, look at that. Just a couple of seconds, I had it all ready to go. And then now I can say that this is my newsletter template. Get rid of the ending there so I'm not confused. And then I can go to File, and I can move this also to my Classroom Templates folder. And so now and it's already in there actually because I made a copy of it from something that was in that folder. Hopefully that made sense. So when I go back to that, because I made a copy of something that was in the folder, there it is, see right there, 8.5 by 11. So it's already in there, which is amazing. So I have this, and I can just use this over and over again. So it just makes things quick and easy. And I have a format set up that I like, and I can do that for other pages if I want. And the idea is to have something quick and easy. The other thing Canva does really well is you notice this is what is called a frame, which is under Elements. If I go down, we have right here, frames, and there's all different shapes. So you can see this one is just a square I grabbed, and then I just elongated it, and I put in that image I had earlier. So I'm gonna undo that. But if I had a blank, I can go to Uploads, and I can grab whatever image I want, and you see, when I get close to that, it just snaps in. So there's multiple ways that you can set things up. So I just click the delete button on my keyboard, the frame stays, and now next time when I'm going to do a new presentation, I can put in the next image that I want to do there because the frame is ready to go. So there's lots of little things like that I can just have set up, ready to go. I have the bullets ready, I have the font and the font size ready to go. So that way I'm not creating a new presentation every time and starting from scratch. I have something that is ready to go and basically has all of our main material that we're doing. So quick check before you share. And when I say before you share, like think about you're going to share with a colleague, you're going to share with your students, you're going to send to families. We don't know what families have going on. So does a family need something that is more accessible and easier for them to understand? So think about, is this content accessible? Do I have images that make sense and are helpful? Do I have text that's easy to read and not crowded? Do I have something that is going to be simple for my families, my students, my colleagues to take and use? These are all things that we can think for just a couple of seconds to help us understand, and think through what is going to be helpful for those we're sending it to. So pause, think about what you're about to share, no matter who it is that you're sharing it with, and that can save you a lot of frustration maybe on somebody else's part. Hopefully this was helpful. We have lots of events going on, both in person and virtually through all of our Phygital Labs learning partners this summer. We just did a thing on social media. We're going to be in 13 different states over the next couple of weeks, having events across the US. The schools are inviting us in to join, and love to have you at some of those. We're also going to be at conferences, so I'd love to see you join us there. If you'd love to learn more, and of course, join and find out about other free events like these webinars, love to have you join us and sign up for our mailing list as well. So thanks for signing up. Thanks for hanging out with me for a little bit. Hopefully I will see you at another one. Thanks everybody. Take care.